Forward. There are a number of people asked to do the forward. Warren Whitlock maybe be a good one to do it. And I have a few other folks. Introduction. My story, my awakening, starts with the death of my father and a magical moment that occurred. My story, my awakening, starts with the death of my father in April 2019. As he lay in his deathbed, with maybe a week left, I found myself taking care of the tomato plants that I had grown from seed. They needed repotting or they would die too. Period. It was a blissful Saturday morning. And as I worked, I thought back on the week. The nights that we spent filling out postcards that he had collected his entire life and had a whole drawer through. And I said, hey, why don't we send these out to people? He liked the idea. And I spent more of my time going through his address book, which he had kept his entire life, and realizing that pretty much every address was obsolete. It took me about 30 to 40 minutes to find one that actually may be viable. Period. I would ask for a name and he would say, no, they're gone. Okay. A few of them he didn't know, but he had a number, so I'd call them and the number wouldn't work, or some other person would pick up and I'd apologize and explain. In about 3 hours, I think we got 3 postcards or 4 postcards done. It was that amount of work. It was really simple, actually. I wrote, I'm relocating. Catch you on the other side. And then I'd have him sign Tom. Period. I chronicled his passing on Facebook with the hashtag place with the number 4 dad. Period. I got some flack a little bit from it, from people who didn't understand me or know me. But those that did thought it was a great gift. I would explain to people that, number one, I want to create a record for myself out of his passing that I can always reflect back on. Number two, I want to provide a roadmap to my 2 boys who are ultimately one day going to have to deal with my demise. And number 3, for those who are similar situation, maybe not now, but in the future, I wanted them to provide them with a real example of what to expect, something you can't get in any book. Period. And finally, for those in denial, I wanted to shove it in their face. Because death is not something we can avoid, and you better wake up and deal with it. The sooner the better, especially if there's loved ones concerned. Period. The tomato plants looked really healthy. They were brimming out of the milk cartons that had become their pots. I remember thinking how blissful everything felt. And my mind quickly went back to an odd thing that had occurred a few days prior, where my dad, when I greeted him in the customary morning, 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 didn't respond with morning, 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 but instead responded with, I've got a ticket. Period. I replied, you got a ticket? Yeah. Well, where are we going? You see, at this stage, I would go everywhere with my father. I would drive him to the doctor's office. We went to Ohio for seeing his bench that he'd built, which would be his last internment. And it was just unfathomable for me to even think that I would not be going with him anywhere. Well, I replied, how are we going? We're going by plane, by train? And he goes, I don't know. I have a ticket. I shrugged it off as maybe him having some strange dream and didn't put much thought to it. I finished with the tomatoes and I entered into the kitchen to prepare my omelets. I make kind of a special organic omelet that has become rather famous in the community, and my friends call me on occasion for me to make them an omelet. Well, Leslie was coming over, and I thought I'd better get on the omelet because she had requested one. Period. So as I prepared to get ready the materials, all of a sudden I notice a small bird go flying across the room, straight from the sliding door which I had entered, which I had thought I'd closed, and directly to where my dad would always watch his Fox TV. It was his spot. He would look out of the windows from there. He would live in this spot. I didn't think of it much at the time. I just thought, holy shit, there's a bird in the house. And my first thought was, how did it get in here? So as I maneuvered, first I wanted to check the sliding door, and I noticed that when I'd pushed it to slide, I'd left a gap about 2 or 3 inches. But what was curious to me was the curtain was covering that 2 or 3 inches, so it wasn't like there was a clear runway through the glass, right? It was just weird that the bird literally had to make kind of a zigzag to come in. I just made a note of that as I started to look for the bird, which I couldn't find, and I didn't concern me. It was like, why isn't this bird trying to get out of the big, side windows? What's it doing? Next thing I know, the bird goes flying by me, makes a beeline down the hall, ignoring all the windows, all the exits and everything else, like a bird would normally do, would fly into glass trying to get out, right? This bird didn't do any of that. This bird flew straight back to where my dad. I gave chase to it, and as I am following behind it, I watch it fly directly over my father. Now, the bird could have easily flown straight where there's a window or flown to the left where there's a big glass, sliding door. But instead, it made the choice to fly over my father and to a window that actually had its blinds down. What was really curious to me was the fact that my father was able to track the bird. You have to understand, my father's legally blind, and this thing was no bigger than my hand, right? It turns out it was my father's favorite bird, a wren, which I didn't know at the time until Leslie would inform me what it was. So I'm like, great. I've just gone from a frying pan into the fire. I've got the bird now stuck, with my dad. So my first thought was, I got to get the bird out of here. So I opened the sliding door, okay? And to my amazement, the bird flew straight out the door like it, like I wanted it to do. I was like, great. I got him out of the house. And all this time I'm talking out loud to my father, letting him know what's going on. And my father really isn't responsive, right? But I saw him move his head. And he would come in and out over the last week where, he would have to regain his energy. And I just figured it was one of these days. I wasn't expecting it to be my last with him, so to speak, period. So I get out onto the porch and I open up the side door. The bird easily found that door, which was glass. It should easily find this one. Well, this little guy ended up trolling me, like playing with me, right? It would fly from corner to corner. I was there holding up, trying to get it to go out the side door, and it would go into the back, which was the back left side. I would go to the back left. It would then fly across from me to the back left. So I'd turn around, now it was there, and then it would fly again to this corner. It just kept flying. And seriously, for 5 minutes, I'm kind of waving this, I had the lid of one of my boxes. I was trying to shut it out. And finally Linda comes walking in and goes, "Hey," I go, "Linda, I got this damn bird and it won't leave." She goes, "Just leave it. It'll figure its way out." All right. She's kind of like, a whisperer of animals. She's kind of like, one of those Jewesses, and she saves the animals on the side of the road and nurtures them. If anyone knows how birds would act, Leslie would know that. So I go back into the kitchen to start on the eggs. So I go back into the kitchen to start on the omelet. And as I worked, Leslie watched the bird. And she watched. And she goes, "That's strange." What she noticed was the bird really acting up. The door was open, but the bird acted all flustered. It was as if basically the bird was annoyed that I had left. After months of reflection on this incident, I've come to realize that this was the vehicle my father was talking about. I got a ticket. It was this little wren's job to fetch my father. Now, you have to understand, I'm not the kind of person who believes in ghosts. I'm not the kind of person who believes in all this crazy mystical stuff, right? I am, I would say, more of an atheist. It needs to be based in science and fact. But this was just too strange for me. Period. And it made me reflect back to December of 2011 when I had given up on working on Foundups. I had spent nearly 2 years trying to get it going. I had reached out to Dave McClure and Odeo, Reese, Hittum, Eric Reese. To such a point, some of these people blocked me because I was that annoying. And when Noam Chomsky did his documentary in 2011 called On the Wealth and Power Cycle, I even reached out to Norm and said, "Norm, I have a solution to your problem. We could fix this problem, this wealth and power cycle. But here's my problem. I don't have any money. I live in rural Japan, in the heartland of Zen Buddhism, surrounded by rice fields, and I have spent since 2004 to this date meditating on how do I save the planet. And I think I have the answer. Period. He responded kindly, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Period. So here it was, near the end of the year, and I was having a very tough time with my wife. I felt that I'd been a failure with all this work I'd wasted, and something miraculous happened. A circle appeared on my face. It was as if I could press hard with a finger and force the blood out, and there was a white, like the blood had moved and created a white line all the way around. And I actually made a video of this. I know I have a video of this because I remember making a video of this saying, this is weird. This is fucking weird. What is going on? Why do I have a video? Now, I have thousands of videos, and back then I didn't know about hashtagging. And YouTube is not very conducive to searching your archives. And to be honest, I haven't spent a lot of time on trying to find it. But I have asked others to look, period. And at the time, I knew the Mayan calendar was ending the following year. So I Googled Mayan plus circle. And the Mayan zodiac appeared. And it stopped me the moment I looked at it. Period. My first instinct, my feeling, not a thought, just like, that's me. That's me. I was like, then reality came in. I was like, no, you're being stupid. How can that be you? It's 6,000 years old. That's not you, right? Because you have to understand. Now, understand the blockchain was only in the Satoshi Bitcoin white paper. And it was called a chain of blocks. Period. It wouldn't be until 2014 that the term would be coined by Ethereum. Period. And what really made me think it was me was touching his head and coming out like a metaphor for coming out of your mind was a belt, a blockchain that went around. Now, he had the bricks around the foundation represents blockchain, but this would be what I called the Open Startup Innovation Framework. This diagram right here, the first ever drawing, and it was dynamic. I had built it on Slide Rocket, which was eventually bought by Clearsides as a friendly hostile acquisition to kill the competition. And eventually all my slides I'd built on there were gone. This image here was the belt going around. This image here, to me, was the belt going around the person that I would ultimately call UnDaoDu. Me and my best friend would name him 30,000 feet up in the air as we played with the idea that, in fact, the prophecy is real and we are the guys, and the dude needs a name. Mike and I joked that what if the plane crashed? There would be no future. There would be no nothing. You know, the prophecy would end and the world would end with it, period. It was nice to think you're that important. And we laughed and joked. And we had an amazing time at DEF CON 2. And walked away with a big offer to fund Foundups. And I was flown to South Africa, but the deal didn't happen. It's a shame, because I'd be a billionaire right now. We would have launched our ICO in early 2017. We would have had the best names. I had a choice of a number of actors to be the face. And we would have raised a lot of money. Period. But a number of things kept me from taking the deal, which cost me my entire team except for Mike. And in hindsight, it was the right choice because my father became terminally ill in late 2017. And I spent the next 2 years with him, caring for him. Period. On the back of UnDaoDu, is an odd thing. A face looking out of what looks like a vault. What makes this face interesting to me at the time, what made the face interesting to me at the time, is it looked like a child's blank face looking out into the world for the first time, period. And I immediately knew who it was. It was the noodle. Which will be the AI that would run Foundups. I thought to myself, that's the noodle. And what's really strange is it looks a lot like my monitor with the legs down here. This is an old monitor. So I was like, that's my monitor. Well, it turns out they're legs of a safe, a vault. And I wouldn't make this distinction until 2019. The images around him were obvious to me. The 19 open corporations that would usher in the new age. The new age. Period. They were also the 19 brothers and sisters of Dadu who would help him. Do it. I don't know where I need to go with the introduction, but okay, over time. Re-inspired by this Rosetta Stone, re-energized and inspired by what I think of as a Rosetta Stone, a secret message hidden in plain sight, maybe my very ancestor, for me to find and to be awoken by. After all, I cannot explain that bird. And if I can't explain that bird, then obviously I don't need to explain this, because both are equally as magical. Period. The bird made me realize that I need to accept this mantle, that maybe in fact I am this reincarnation or vessel or who God knows what, just like that vehicle, that vessel that took my father. Period. You see, after his ride came, he would not eat or drink again. he would, when I went to make his breakfast, I was like, here I would make him a magic bullet with all the fighting cancer blueberries and oatmeal and just so many things. Strawberries, lots of fruits, aloe, right, for coating his stomach because he had ulcers, herbs from my garden, little mint. And then I would put an egg in there for protein. And you're probably wondering, this must sound horrible, but I'm very good at making these. And I was able to mask the flavor and the taste with his Ovaltine. Oh, no, 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 no. What did I do? Screwed up here. Why is that? It shouldn't be. Why is this? regardless of the true meaning, I was re-energized, inspired by what I think now to be that I would later accept After all, I cannot explain that bird. If I cannot explain that bird, who am I? They're equally as magical. The bird made me. The bird made me realize that I do not need to accept this mantle that maybe in fact I am. I don't need to explain this mantle that maybe in fact I am this reincarnation or vessel, or God knows what. It, like I now accept the vessel that took my father. You see, after his ride came, he would not eat or drink again. When my father shoved my hand away and stared unemotionally, blankly, as though he was looking through me, at me, I realized this was no longer my father. His body, his heart, his mind, all were there. But he was gone. Period. Having been there for the birth of my children, the analogy is this: just as that moment when that child turns